Hello? Hello? Okay, hi, I'm finally back. Hello? Where is everyone? Where's the light switch? Sorry. Here it is. So I guess we're finally back in the game, and of course that means I'm finally back to talking about one phobia which has been asked for so many times and has probably been the most known and getting the most attention within the last few months. And of course I am talking about one of the most popular in the mental human psyche, Phasmophobia. But of course that's completely irrational, that's stupid, right? Well, yes and no. Phasmophobia is an extension of a few possible phobias that already exist. Of course, like nyctophobia, the fear of the dark, which many of us still hold in our adult lives, monophobia, the fear of being alone in a space, and of course necrophobia, the fear of the dead. The idea of ghosts for many is a huge irrational impossibility, but despite the fact ghosts being very irrational for many, Phasmophobia is still accepted by scientists, and they have taken it on board and very much respect that it's a rational fear that is totally natural to all of us. Philosopher Peter van Inwagen once wrote,
I am perfectly aware that the fear of ghosts is contrary to science, reason, and religion. If I were sentenced to spend a night alone in a graveyard, I should already know that twigs would snap and the wind moan, and that there would be half-seen movements in the darkness. And yet, after I had been frog-marched into the graveyard, I should feel a thrill of fear every time one of these things happened.
Our relationship with spirits and lost souls goes far beyond our historical traditions and human curiosity to understand the afterlife, but of course is also fed by a constant stream and barrage of films, media, books, and so much more. So tell me honestly, what was the first time you felt like there was a presence with you? The first time I really remember taking note of this is of course from the 90s adaptation of the R.L. Stine's Goosebump novels. Well, one day my mum decided to leave me alone while she quickly went out of the house and ran round the corner to get some milk from the shops. And I was sitting there distracted watching Goosebumps. I must have been maybe about 6 years old, and then this scene popped up on the screen.
No!
Now that you have seen me, you cannot leave.
Please!
Of course, you're looking at it now, it's dumb, it's silly, but as a kid, your brain exaggerates whatever you see. I remember watching films and exaggerating horror moments and terrifying myself and scarring myself from something that never really existed. So seeing this spirit shadow figure coming at this child with intent to rip his head off left a gut feeling that caused this phobia and fear that lasted in my stomach for a very long time. It was fair to say I was terrified, and I remember a lot of nights thinking to myself and looking around every single dark corner. It's honestly no wonder why I honestly suffer from phasmophobia. Ghosts in video games. Can phasmophobia, the feeling and fear, be replicated through the games that we play? To answer that question, we're going to have to go back to the beginning. Well, close enough. 1980s Pac-Man is one of the most iconic and possibly the most iconic gaming character in history. And of course the villains and ghosts that chase you around the map are up there along with this yellow icon. Inky, Blinky, Pinky and Clyde are forever loved and feared spirits that remind us of why we love a ghost story no matter the context itself. You may say that Pac-Man's gameplay seems a bit outdated, but don't lie to me when you say that you've played it to this day and you find yourself clenching your butt in anticipation to avoid these colourful spooks. And early on in gaming, this trend continues in the 80s with Capcom's incredible and now classic Ghosts and Goblins, which is now famous for its incredible difficulty and finds you playing as King Arthur in a quest to rescue a princess. And you can't forget about the incredible first appearance of the adorably shy Boos in Super Mario Bros. 3. The Boo has held its place as one of the most loved villains in Mario's roster because of their iconic stages, soundtrack, and of course the way they stalk you only when you're not looking at them. But of course there is a lot more to say about the Boos and their games very soon. Of course, there are so many examples I could get to, but I want to move into the 3D era of gaming itself. When games became 3D, along with the ways our stories are told, and of course how Phasmophobia affected us in the games that we played. To talk about this subject and talk about ghost games in general, I've broken it up into 3 distinctive, but not limited to, subcategories in the Phasmophobia genre in gaming. The first category will be the spooky category. Ghosts don't always have to be scary and have been proven by the likes of Casper to not need to focus on horror. They could be treated as friendly, goofy and fun. Spooky is a feeling we all know. A girl crawling out of a TV? That shit is scary, man. But a man walking around with no feet in bed sheets going woo! Now that's spooky. The second category is the settled home genre. Notice that I say the settled home instead of the haunted house. If I said haunted house, then we're expecting a ghost to be there and we're expecting a threat to these locations. But with a settled home and something that's been untouched and unlived in for years in a time of decaying, now that creates a totally different feeling of never knowing what could be around the next corner and never knowing if there really is a presence that lingers there. And of course, the last genre I will go through is the vengeful genre. We all know the vengeful spirit. We've seen The Grudge, we've seen The Ring, and all these iconic and terrifying ghost tales that come from this genre. There is one goal that come along with these spirits, and of course that come along with these types of games. The ghosts want you dead. So let's begin, shall we? So let's rewind it back a little bit and ease ourselves into the terrifying world of ghosts by looking at those that really capture the childlike, ignore the pun, spirit of the afterlife. For many of us, our first examples of a spooky game is going to be the likes of Sir Dan's Adventures in the PlayStation 1 and now PlayStation 4 classic, Medieval. The monsters and the humour of this world blend into a super tongue-in-cheek tale and take on horror folklore of the past. And Medieval captures the bounciness and colourful atmosphere of any great spooky tale. But for me, when I think of this first spooky feeling appearing in a game, it would have to be that ever so popular and now infamous traumatising mission in the Rugrats video game on PlayStation 1. Honestly, I remember looking at this game, playing this mission, or at least seeing my sister play this mission in pure frustration and terror of the spooky ghosts that float around the map. You look at it now, you just laugh at the JPEGs moving across the floor, but back in the day with the pure atmosphere and tension, there's no wonder why this mission became so popular, and it makes you wonder what other dark secrets the Pickles residence holds.
What the... ghost?
And while we're here, let's not forget a few other classics. I remember the first time visiting Pumpkin Hill and fighting King Bomboo in Sonic Adventure 2. What were they thinking? Look at that thing! And of course, growing up with the Xbox, I couldn't avoid the classic Grabbed by the Ghoulies by Rare, which saw you punch in the face of skeletons and other demons that bounce around on the floor. It's a fun, charming little game, but it was filled with so many great spooks. And of course, I could never forget the first time I came across the incredible looking ghost ship in Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. But Nintendo's reputation for creating brilliant spooky adventures doesn't stop there. And that leads us to the incredible Luigi's Mansion franchise. Luigi's Mansion plays a huge role in my childhood. It felt like for many the safety wheels of survival horror. The first time I remember sitting down playing it at the age of possibly about 7, there was a genuine feeling of dread and fear that came from the spooks that haunt all these dark rooms. From the way that the music would change and fit the tone of each locations you're currently in, to the usage of shadows, lighting and of course physics-based objects in the environment. As a kid, seeing the floating candles of the butler staggering through the halls, or the floating shadowy figure of a dead child in a Nintendo game, reminded me that this wasn't going to be your normal Super Mario Bros. Adventure. Of course, the franchise over time lost its edge of dead children and leaning into more of the comedy characteristics of the ghosts. But from the animation quality to the incredible puzzles and level design, Luigi's Mansion as a franchise remains one of the spookiest, if not maybe the best spookiest games you could play in the category. Now I know exactly what you're thinking. You're looking at these games and thinking that they're all made for kids, or at least aimed at a child audience. But of course spooky does not get limited there because they are aimed for children. The kings of spooky in my opinion goes to Ghostbusters, the 80s classic blending horror and comedy together, and in 2009 we was introduced to what may be the only game worthy of the Ghostbusters name, the Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters 2009 did something that not many adaptations of the Ghostbusters have proven to do: bring along the horror and the comedy. Having ghosts that are full of colour and character, but at the same time knowing when to drop the humour to let the moment and atmosphere just sit in the air and make you go, well, that was spooky.
It's children. What are they saying?
The Ghostbusters video game understands its property and also understands its audience. It's not aimed at children, but instead aimed at people who grew up with the Ghostbusters and who understand its world and the way that its ghost works, therefore allowing itself to go a little bit more serious with its horror when it really wants to. Never going beyond the point of it being pure scary or, utterly terrifying, but at least retaining a good level of spookiness that creates genuine tension if you played this game in a dark room on your own. And it's these moments of tension that you look for in these types of games. Even if you're talking about a game that's grounded in reality with its graphical styles, you'll always find that spooky tingle worming its way up your spine as you look at the ghost people that haunt the metros in Metro 2033, or there's something quite eerie about looking at the distant souls that watch from afar in Murdered Soul Suspect. No matter the situation, graphical style, or even audience it's aimed at, you can always find a good, healthy place to find yourself saying, spooky. We have all seen them, and maybe some of us are lucky enough to have explored them. Homes, buildings left still in time to decay, dust lingering on every surface, and in some cases nature taking back what was stolen. No matter the state of the location, there is something that feels certain. There is an aura or an energy that is stored in every floorboard and hall. We find this feeling flooding the house of the Finch family. Every memory and false smile captured on the pictures on the walls, every room frozen in the moment of death. Each deceased member feeling like they're very much still inhabiting the rooms and locations on which they disappeared on so many years ago. Or more recently, the still and inhabited demos of Resident Evil 7 and 8, filling every single unknown corner with a new sense of terror and dread from an unknown enemy. This feeling lingers and appears while you're exploring the dreamlike atmosphere of the vanishing of Ethan Carter. Every home and tomb and even forest and walkway makes you feel like you're very much not alone in this universe, and that there is a bigger power at play here that inhabits this lonely and absent world of any kind of life. The settled genre doesn't necessarily need to be embedded with horror. A great example of this is Gone Home. Gone Home never is anything more than paranoia of what if and what could be, reading notes and making up your own stories in your head of what's happening in this huge mansion. But there is also a feeling that lingers with this paranoia, making you believe you're being stalked around the house, or there is something watching you, peeking from the corners of each hall, or lurking in a dark room. So while we're on the subject of horror and rooms, let's talk about Silent Hill. Silent Hill primarily isn't on this list, because I believe that the monsters here don't necessarily count as ghosts, because, who really knows what's going on in Silent Hill. But with Silent Hill 4, there's a ghostly atmosphere and presence that feels a lot more akin to Japanese horror and the settled home genre. The undeniable horror that Room 302 provides to the player is still something that very much lingers with them after walking through these oppressive halls, and the dread that came with each time you peeked through an eye hole or glared through an impossible crack for far too long. Room 302's impact in gaming is just as big as the town Silent Hill itself. Despite not being the game's name, 302 seems to have had a lingering impact that's remained around for so many years. It's appeared in Silent Hill Downpour as a small Easter egg, and most recently turned up in the very successful horror Visage. but undoubtedly its oppressive, atmospheric and puzzling nature acts as one of the biggest inspirations for the later Silent Hill entry, PT. Looking at PT now and comparing it to Silent Hill 4, it's undoubtedly similar in so many ways. The menacing room in which you're trapped in, moving bags and lumps of flesh, and of course all this links back to the OG 302. PT is full of so many horrors and definitely deserves a spot in the settled home genre, but there's a lot more on PT later that goes in a little bit more of a terrifying direction. But while we're on the subject of PT's influence on the settled home genre, I mentioned earlier Visage, which is a spiritual successor to PT, and 2 is about walking around a home avoiding this horrible figure that haunts you in the dark. Visage is pretty important though. It isn't just about a settled home and there isn't just a vengeful ghost, but also it shows us a situation where horror can actually slip into the spooky category, once again proving that it doesn't have to be aimed at children.
Well, who the hell is that guy?
It's just a new resident. The crazy one.
Yeah, he's nuts. Always on drugs and alcohol. Don't mind him. He's probably out of it anyway.
Everyone who lives here is fucked up anyway. Fuck him. Let's move on.
There isn't nothing necessarily scary or unsettling about this scene, but it feels like something very much in line of the comedy of spooky games or even films like The Evil Dead, and even so acts like a parody of the genre. But somehow this moment, despite its goofy and wacky comparison to the rest of the game, creates a feeling for this house that makes you feel like you're really falling into a void of madness, and it makes you feel like no matter what you do next, the house is alive, moving and always watching you. But it isn't just a house that is watching you in these halls. Now, the vengeful, angry ghost story is probably the easiest and our favourite sort of ghost story in the mainstream. Is that because it's easy to create a villain? Is it a way to get away with making cheap jump scares? And maybe it's just because we relate to the feeling of being attacked, and of course the idea of being attacked by a ghost, there's probably nothing worse. But it doesn't stop there from being a good take on this genre. The ones that do it right, do it right. But before I go on, I know you're already typing it, of course I was going to talk about Phasmophobia, the video game on here. It's literally named after the fear itself, creating a tense atmosphere that remains genuinely scary even when you're playing with a bunch of friends. But I'm not going to talk about it in detail, because I love that game so much I've already dedicated a whole entire video to it, so please feel free to check that out after you're done with this. There's going to be a link up top and at the end of the video. Now, if we're going to talk about an angry, vengeful ghost, there is one iconic ghost figure that continues to be iconic in the gaming community. I am of course talking about the timeless 2005 shooter Fear and the spirit of Alma. Alma takes a lot from the Yuri and Japanese horror cinema. If there was an aspect they nailed, it's the unpredictable and terrifying horrors that Alma puts you through. From start to finish in the franchise, she'll always find new ways to make you second guess what you just saw or even who's standing behind you. Fear's presence as a horror franchise may have been challenged as it lent into the action genre, but there's no doubt that Alma still remains a formidable foe that we would love to see make a genuine comeback in gaming. The way that she stalks you, the way she can teleport around the map, and the way that it's hard to decipher whether or not what she's doing to you is real or not really creates a presence with this character, makes all her games memorable, even the crap ones. Let's quickly jump back to PT and talk about Lisa. Lisa had a profound effect on the world of horror gaming. Other than the never-ending hallways or the messed up imagery that appears that completely worked in her favour and favour of the atmosphere of the game, it was the game's visual style of the demo that really had an impact. When it first appeared, a picture very quickly popped around that looked like something someone took from their phone for people to realise that holy shit, this is a video game. Someone had edited the colour grading and the contrast to create what looked like something out of a film or photorealism. Lisa had gone from an unknown figure into a demo to the next generation of horror and what horror could be and what it will possibly become. In the wake of PT, the surreal, vengeful horror genre blew up. Along with Visage, you had Devotion, Layers of Fear, Paper Dolls, and of course the forever lost Allison Road. The PT clone genre to this day is still booming. Whether that's a good or bad thing is entirely up to you, but there is no doubt the effect that PT had on people, the fear, the genuine horror that it created, that earned its name and spot as one of the scariest games of all time, and we're not going to see that die down anytime soon. And that's about does it. I really can't think of any other vengeful ghost video game out there. That's right. Yeah, you finished typing. I can't believe he didn't talk about Fatal Frame. No way am I going to leave out possibly one of the most influential paranormal horror video game franchises out there. 2001's Fatal Frame created a name of itself as one of the scariest games on PlayStation 2. What made Fatal Frame so terrifying for myself and siblings growing up is that we was never actually able to experience it when it came out. But I definitely knew of its existence. A game that feels something right out of a Japanese horror movie where you're forced to face off against trapped souls with a camera. And that right there was the catch. This game stands out amongst the rest in survival horror at the time. If you grew up playing survival horror, you're used to the panning cameras of Silent Hill or even the locked camera angles of Resident Evil and Alone in the Dark. But what Fatal Frame did was uncomfortably able to grab you by the collar and throw you front and center in the face of the horribly detailed ghosts. There was something that felt extremely personal with this choice of combat. You truly felt like you were going face to face with a spirit and there was only one thing you could do to survive, and that was endure it. Go into the first person, get the best picture you could, linger on the shot to get the most powerful opportunity of attack. This game made you feel uncomfortable with its atmosphere, its camera angles, and its combat. Fatal Frame as a franchise is fantastic and you should definitely check it out if you haven't. I spoke about Fatal Frame, and for old time's sake, while we're talking about being thrown into the face of horror, let's not forget virtual reality. VR really adds a new layer to this fear. The fear itself comes from our natural insecurities as primates and for our survival, being watched by an unseen figure and feeling helpless and lost in locations on our own. So when a device comes along that blocks our senses, stops our vision, and making sure we're unable to see anything past the virtual world, it's no wonder that VR horror has a profound effect unlike any other. Having a full 360 virtual view around you while playing Phasmophobia, for example, is utterly terrifying, knowing that the ghost could be right in your face as soon as you turn around. Along with the incredible audio design, there is no better way to play Phasmophobia other than in VR, to just get the full atmosphere and just to fill your body with dread. And VR is full with so many neat and small experiences. There's a fantastic spin-off to the Dread Out franchise, which is also another ghost series, which is called Dread Eye. Dread Eye VR is an Indonesian horror game that allows you to be a shaman who is sitting in the middle of a graveyard just summoning demons. It's one of those experiences that allows you to take as much as you think you can take. It gets really dark, creepy and unusual in certain places, but is definitely worth checking out. The best part about this game is that spirits will just randomly spawn around the map, so you'll be doing something and you'll just see someone watching you from a distance. There's a great sense of atmosphere, but at the end you get 2 revolvers and get to go wild and shoot whatever once scared you, so it's got a good stress relief. Along with that, they also tried to make a Ghostbusters game in VR, but it was set on the 2016 reboot series, but it was quite cool to have an experience where you finally felt like a Ghostbuster, though just not coming as close to that 2009 game. And while we're on the subject of other little games, you cannot forget The Exorcist Legion. Now, The Exorcist Legion seems to have been forgotten, and I don't think it should be. This game, for better or worse, it slaps. It's incredible. They have so many great ideas here that work well in VR. You play as well an exorcist detective who must go out his way and stop people from being hurt or being possessed by demons. Every chapter and scenario feels fresh, and every time you come against a new demon, it's exciting to see what they're going to throw at you. This game definitely doesn't deserve to be slept on, and I think if you have a virtual reality headset, you should check it out if you're a fan of The Exorcist. So many great moments of horror, and there's so many great moments of just release of horror. Moments that make you feel cool and make you feel like you are on top of the situation. And that was Phasmophobia in video games. Thank you so much for watching. Is there games here that you never knew existed and you want to check out? And is there games that I definitely missed? I know I missed. I know I didn't talk about Castlevania and such because I just wanted to focus on games that, you know, just make emphasis on ghosts. So that's sort of what I went for. But of course, if there are games that are not even ghost games that sort of give you this feeling of dread, please let me know down below. I would love to hear games that gave you this fear and this feeling. I will be making a video separately explaining how this channel will change, but the Phobia series is some of my favorite to do, so these definitely will not be going anywhere. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to subscribe, and why not stick around for more videos just like this every other month or so. I'll see you at the next checkpoints. Goodbye.